Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the opening lecture of the Council on African Studies lecture series for 2021-2022. My name is Kajata Anieka. I teach in English department, and on behalf of the Council, I want to welcome everyone who has joined us today, especially our speaker, Dr. George Bob-Milliar, who has graciously accepted to share his work with us. I just wanted to say quickly that, we have a series of talks scheduled for the rest of the semester. Tomorrow, for example, I'll be in conversation with our own Jerry Jarvis at noon. On October 13th, we're welcoming Sheikh Thiam, who is going to speak on negritude and Black Atlantic. On October 27th, the visual artist Adejoke Tubuyele will be speaking to us about our project, Real Blood. November 10, we have Rudo Mudiwa speaking on From Exile to Government, the Invention of New Women as Zimbabwe's Independence. And the last but not least for this semester is Wendy Laura Belcher, who is joining us from Princeton to talk to us about our work on early Ethiopian literature. So you will see from this list that we have, a diverse set of talks, different speakers coming from different aspects of African studies. And we hope you'll be able to join us to engage with the speakers who have graciously accepted to speak with us. So that's really what I have. Without wasting much time, I want to turn this over to Enoch, who will be introducing our August visitor today. It's over to you, Enoch.
Thanks so much for your time. I'm very elated to be here today and then to present to us our presenter for this lecture. So, good day to everybody. I'm Enoch Osei-Kodia. I'm in the African Studies program in my final year, and today we are here to listen to a talk by Professor George Bob-Milliar of KNUST, Ghana. So I'll give a little bit background information about him and speak a little bit about his research interests and his current projects, give him time to present his lecture, and then we would have the chance to ask questions. So with the questions, I just wanted to talk about that before I talk about it, I give his background information. With the questions, there is a Q&A section that you can see on your Zoom, and that is where you would put any questions that would come up as he gives his lecture, and then we would have time to for him to answer those questions. So please use the Q&A section to write every single question that you would have, for him to answer. Thanks so much. Our presenter today is, by name, as I said earlier on, George Bob-Milliar. He's a senior lecturer in the Department of History and Political Studies and at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Kumasi, Ghana. He joined the faculty of KNUST in August 2013 and has been involved in research, teaching, and mentoring of students at all levels. He is currently serving as the director of KNUST's Center for Culture and African Studies. In 2012, Bob-Milliar received his PhD from the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana, the oldest center for African studies on the continent. Trained as an interdisciplinary scholar, his research lies in the intersection of history, political science, and development studies. He has published in preeminent journals in his field of specialization. Bob-Milliar has been a visiting fellow at the University of Oxford last year, University of Cambridge, Uganda's Makerere University, and the Danish Institute for International Studies. He has also been a guest lecturer at the Johannes Gutenberg University in Mainz, Germany, and also the University of San Francisco in the US. His research interests are in African studies, African politics and development, informalization of party politics, democratic studies, which includes electoral politics, traditional informal institutions, social, political, and economic history of Ghana and Africa at large, qualitative research approaches, and diaspora and migration. Currently, Professor Bob-Milliar is working on political parties branding in Africa, which is funded by GTZ Germany, And I think next month they're having a workshop in Gabon. So if you're interested, you can contact him. He's working on this project with Anja Osei. And also he's working on a current project that is funded by the British Academy on wood parks in Ghana. They are studying the uses of Jackson Park in Kumasi from three disciplinary perspectives, that is politics, religion, and sociology. And the project runs from 2021 to 2023. Also, they are mentoring about 3 early career researchers from Kia University in these particular projects. So for today's lecture, Prof will be talking to us about the social pathways that party activists use to enter the Parliament of Ghana. I'm very elated to present to us Professor Bob-Milliar. Doc, if you're online, please, can you speak to us? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Enoch, and thank you, Kajatan. I thank all of you for the invitation. So I'm coming to talk to you about something that I've been working on off and on. In 2012, we did some work on party primaries in Ghana, looking at what we call in search of honorable membership. That is more typical political science kind of research, looking at the party structures and how party candidates are selected to represent political parties. Since then, I've been thinking about this whole issue about how the political parties in Ghana behave, how they seek to have representation in parliament, and the role that society plays. So I term this presentation the social pathways that party activists use to enter the Parliament of Ghana. A representation is a political action that is in more mainstream political science. You don't need a social foundation to have the opportunity to represent. Literature says if you have the message, you have your party strong with a very strong party organization, and with a message, you can be elected. But in the context of Ghana, it appears that is not what happens. So this talk is about that. I'm framing this talk looking at it within 3 broad areas, looking at the theoretical debates about Africa's redemocratization. Then I'll situate this within Ghana's own experiment, what is still ongoing. Then finally, I'll look at what I call the social pathways that activists use to enter the Parliament of Ghana. Elections are now a regular feature in many countries, and citizens look up to the election season. Perhaps we can term that the cocoa season. And if you understand the history of Ghana, cocoa is very important to the Ghanaian economy. Anytime the farmers harvest the cocoa and they sell to the state, buying marketing organizations, that season comes with a lot of money. So elections appears to be that kind of season where Africans celebrate it. Of course, it will depend on the country's own electoral calendar. In some countries, it's 4 years, 5 years. Elections in many African countries are full of what Nick Chisman and his collaborators call moral claims. The voters and the public demand, and they critically evaluate government's performance. So moral claim making has been instrumentally deployed to promote political projects in many countries. Of course, what is currently happening across sub-Saharan Africa is something that started in the early 1990s, what Bratton van der Waal termed then democratic experiments. Of course, for the first decade, it was experimentation. But by the early 2000s, it appears then and now that electoral democracy is taking roots in Africa. Elections have become regular. And the popular mode of democratization in the context of Africa is through elections. And various types, if we may call it that way, looking at some research led by Stefan Lemberg, talks about the varieties of democracies. And I would like to situate what I'm talking about, or what is generally happening across Africa, that yes, is varieties of democracies that are emerging in these countries. that there's consolidation in the process. Even though initially the transition, according to many scholars, and for Kwame Nkrumah, he terms what he calls politics without rules, that these transitions were organized by discredited political systems, were organized by military strongmen in the context of Ghana, J. Rawlings, and that access to state power was the aim. And now with state power comes with wealth and privileges. Of course, still within that framework of consolidation, Lindsay Whitfield thinks, and she argues strongly, if you look at the party system in Ghana, and Anja Osei also makes the same case in the case of Senegal, that there's an institutionalization of the party system, and that this has contributed to a peaceful turnover of power in the context of Ghana. It has now happened 3 times, Senegal, it has happened, Nigeria, and that across the continent, you see power transfer happening peacefully. The most recent example being Malawi, where the opposition won. Of course, so in this context, some form of consolidation has taken place across sub-Saharan Africa, electoral democracies. And that within consolidation comes with the democratic dividends or some prosperity, and that there's a close link between liberal democratic reforms and economic growth across the continent, that some countries are on the move, and that between 2005 and 2017, average growth rates hovered around 5 to 7. Some economists think is outset of COVID that has slowed down and is likely to throw many of these economies out of gear. But largely, economic growth has been driven by commodities. China's appetite for commodities has contributed to economic growth, and that those countries that are exporters of oil, in the context of Nigeria, Angola, they would qualify to come under this prosperity. Growth in the context of Sub-Saharan Africa in this period of liberal democratization has only reflected in figures. Across the continent, if you case by case, country by country, you see that yes, there's some transformation, but that economic growth has not reflected in the livelihoods or in the daily lives of many Africans. It hasn't trickled down. And distribution of income has become more unequal despite the so-called economic growth. Of course, nevertheless, many countries have witnessed some transformation. There's massive investment in infrastructure, roads, housing. This is to buttress the fact that yes, liberal democracy has contributed to stability, is transforming economies, and that is impacting many of these African countries. Ghana appears to be a model in quotes, because many countries look up to Ghana, but essentially Ghana has been democratizing through the power of elections, according to Stefan Lemberg. And we argue that yes, it's done this democratization for the last 2 decades more successfully, but that it does not run on an even plane, that occasionally there are democratic ruptures. And these ruptures could be the form of disputed elections, and we've seen a couple of them. The 2012 presidential election was disputed, and the most recent one, 2020, was equally disputed. Yes, in the context of electoral democracy, Ghana has experienced some deterioration in its electoral gains. Of course, the behavior of incumbent administrations is a crucial factor accounting for this deterioration. Like I said, Ghana returned to multi-party politics in 1992 after 3 failed attempts. Now, the country is generally regarded as one of the most mature democracies in sub-Saharan Africa. It's ranked number 6 in the Economic Intelligence Unit published by the Economics magazine, but described as a flawed democracy. So essentially, Ghana is an electoral democracy. It's endowed with more open political system and a number of stable democratic institutions. It's a party democracy at play. And that is so far conducted very peaceful 8 general elections since 1992. But within these elections, 2 dominant parties, the National Democratic Congress, that is currently the political opposition, and the New Patriotic Party, that is the incumbent. It has a multi-party system, but eventually, and what actually pertains is a de facto 2-party system. There are other minor parties within the party system. That for us to understand where Ghana is coming from and where it's headed, it's important for us to situate this within the country's own history of state building. And that is undergone several challenges when it comes to state building. It's experimented with liberal democracy, but the previous attempt did not bear any fruit, of course. A heavy dose of authoritarianism. As you can see from my slide, you've seen a couple of several military generals that have ruled Ghana, and of course, military rule came in the Ghanaian context with a lot of inconvenience. The country eventually made a return to multi-party politics in the early 1990s and have now stayed on that route, and appears democracy in the Ghanaian context is the only game in town, and that appears Ghanaians have now accepted multi-party politics, and this is backed by several rounds of Afrobarometer surveys. And that the political elites appear to have a consensus on the rules of the game, and that when you lose election, you hand over and wait and run again. This perhaps is also what has given the Fourth Republic its foundation and has made it unique. Constitutionalism has also come to be entrenched in the Ghanaian context, where presidential term limits are respected. Currently, what happened in Guinea is traced to the former president manipulating the constitution to extend the presidential term limits. In the Ghanaian context, it's 2 terms for his president, and you're out. And it has also witnessed the institutionalization of programmatic politics. In addition, we have a very functioning national legislature. I'll put a question mark, I'll come to that. And an independent judiciary where rule of law and due process is respected and other civil liberties are respected. And a very active civil society organizations that are present, and a free press. Of course, that is the positive side of it. There are several defects in this so-called model democracy. It's just, I argue, Ghana's democracy is essentially a work in progress. The country is struggling to move beyond its achievement in electoral gains and to have more substantive form of democracy. And it's underpinned by the winner takes it all, where power is concentrated in the executive, a very powerful executive that appoints, decides almost everything. In addition, there's extreme partisanship, and extreme partisanship in the Ghanaian context affects long-term development planning. Previously, in the other 3 republics, the nation had what they call development plans that try to guard where government would invest. In the Fourth Republic, there's nothing like a long-term development plan. Every political party rules the country through the party manifesto. This is not sustainable. No country develops through a party manifesto. Political representation is highly skewed in favor of males. There's underrepresentation of women in politics and higher decision-making bodies. And of course, electoral politics in Ghana is highly monetized, what Ghanaians call monocracy. And party campaign financing is equally unregulated. In a developing country, I'll give you in some figures of how much is spent on trying to get nominated for running on a party's platform. Party activities are very important. And in the Ghanaian context, parties have very large membership. You have sympathizers, party patrons, and others. Some party members are very active within the party structures. These activists work to promote the interests of the party, whether in government or opposition, and they seek to represent their party. The route to representation in the context of if an activist wants to represent the party in parliament, it's a very long route, and the emphasis I put here is the social pathways. It's these pathways that activists will have to pursue to get the opportunity to represent their political party in the national legislature. So increasingly, social means in this context that I'm talking about, which is a political system, but it's the social means that carry weight if you want to get into parliament. Social means are promoted by individuals. These are the party activists. Social means are promoted by the community where the individual lives. And the social means, interestingly, are promoted by the political party organizations. At the individual party activist level, there is what I call the pre-qualification level, that for an individual to go through these social pathways, you have to establish your roots within the community or within the electoral area or the constituency that you are planning to run on. You must have deep family roots in that electoral area. How deep are your family roots? Can you be traced 3 generations down, or are they shallow? Is it based on matrilineal links or patrilineal links? Personal wealth. Is a party activist able to show that he's or she is a self-made person? You have to demonstrate this by showing that you have a house or houses in that electoral area. Schoolmates and membership in other social groups. Are you able to show all of this? And that if you can show all these 3 levels of family roots, personal wealth in the area, schoolmates, the membership in social groups, then this is the pre-qualification level at the individual level. Then there's the community validation, which is what the political party endorses, which is the qualification level. And this level would earn you the party nomination. Infrastructure. Have you provided infrastructure in the form of a school building? Have you built a clinic? Is there a police station that has been provided by you? Or have you reconstructed the lorry park in the community? Street lights. Have you built a mosque for the Muslim community in that area? Then, very importantly, pre-qualification level, paying of school fees. Have you paid any school fees, medical bills? Are you attending funerals? Are you attending outdoorings, weddings, and all of this? Not only attending funerals. When you attend the funerals, how much money do you donate to support the bereaved family? Then finally, providing employment either in state agencies and others. This is very important, and the political parties use this as the qualification for an individual who is desiring to run on the party's ticket to get nominated. Of course, the emphasis here is social pathways, that the parties will argue is not compulsory, but that for you to have the community support, you must have evidence that you've provided some form of infrastructure in the community. If you have not built a school, but that you can show some evidence that you mobilize funds to have this infrastructure provided. So political parties in the Ghanaian context, and the argument that I'm advancing here is that Ghana is essentially an electoral democracy, and that the achievement mainly is in the field of elections. So there's a lot of investments for political parties, and parties are motivated primarily by the desire for electoral success, to win and be represented. So parties' constitutions indirectly promote social pathways to accessing parliament. What they call the nurturing of a constituency, which is social investment. Now, actually, these are captured in the political party constitutions, the dominant parties. A member must be in good standing to qualify for nomination selection to occupy a party position. And in good standing necessarily does not mean just paying your membership dues. No, you have to go beyond paying of membership dues to show that you are promoting the party's image in the community that you live in, either by these social investments that are outlined. This is very important for the political parties. There's a cost to the social investment or the social pathways that this talk is looking at. There are 3 levels. That intra-party election campaigns, that is just getting the parliamentary nomination. Approximately, you would need between $85,000 US to $120,000 US to get your party nomination. This is just the intra-party. Now, this approximation figures that I've given you are based on a quantification of some of the physical infrastructures that these party activists provided before they won their party nomination and eventually winning the seat to go into parliament. The second level is the inter-party campaigns at the constituency level, which would average between 1 to 2 million Ghana cedis. That's the cost of investment that inter-party contest would bring. The inter-party election campaigns at the presidential level is a question mark because it's like the black box of elections in Ghana. There's some secrecy there because nobody knows how much political parties are able to raise. Donors are not known, and nothing is known about this. Of course, money is essential for the proper functioning of multi-party politics everywhere. These so-called advanced democracies, they spend a lot of money, and this is what the emerging democracies are coping. But in the Ghanaian context, private funding has become the only means of sustaining party politics because of the absence of state funding. The state does not currently fund political campaigns. There's the over-reliance of private funding is undermining Ghana's democracy. The sources of funds, what I call the black box of politics, is a major challenge. Currently, we don't know who funds political activities in Ghana. There's the legitimate means of raising funds, which is through membership dues, but not many members are able to pay their dues. But political parties run well-funded campaigns, and all of that, we don't know much. Even though the laws requires political parties to file their accounts with the Electoral Commission, this usually is not done. And even if it's done, accessing the information from the Electoral Commission is very problematic. So essentially, the sponsors of elections are not known. In the same way, for at the parliamentary level, what are the social costs? Some funding is targeted at individual activists in the communities. This is a study done by the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, and it tries to look at the sources of funding for MPs parliamentary election in Ghana. Look at the source, income, personal income carries a lot. Friends, family, business firms, and finally loans, which is here another case that requires further probing, that politics has become a business. So MP aspirants would go to the bank and contract a loan and invest this in their election campaigns. Of course, once loans are contracted and investment are made in politics, of course, that those investments will need to be recouped when power is won, and this is very problematic. So, by way of trying to wrap up, what are the implications of accessing parliament through social pathways? Now, social pathways negatively impact on internal party democracy. It promotes some form of investment, which is that no matter how active you are within the party structure, if you don't have investment in the community that you live in, you will not have the opportunity to serve your party. And the social investment in politics also affects the level of accountability, whether you look at it along the horizontal and the vertical lines. Now, the politicians, because the claim is through their own effort, and that is through their own resources that they are able to access public office, usually disregard public opinion in a lot of major policy decisions. Because for many of these activists, they feel that they will have to respond to their benefactors. Of course, it also affects women. women are discouraged from running for office because women generally, in the context that I'm looking at it, in many of the cases that I looked at, I interviewed, usually find it very difficult mobilizing funds. They are not seen as credible. That in some communities, no matter how active you are as a female, when it comes to party nominations, the sponsors would rather look at the males and try to sponsor them against that. So the social pathways that now have become institutionalized in the Ghanaian context disadvantages women from running for public office. So briefly, this is what I have by way of looking at the social pathways that party activists use to enter the Parliament of Ghana. So thank you so much for your attention. I'll stop sharing my screen here and I will welcome your comments and your questions. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Doc. I really enjoyed the talk. And
I hope I didn't go above time.
No, please, not at all. I mean, there's so much time for us to have conversations around what was presented. So thanks so much, Doc, for this lovely presentation. And as I said early on, any questions that we may have can be written in the Q&A section on the Zoom so that I can read them to Doc and he would respond to them. So we are now waiting for questions, concerns, any more clarifications that you may have. Okay. Okay, Doc. There is a question from Mina Yakubu. The question is, if providing these social services, that is, building schools or paying fees, get them into office, does this provide any insight into what reduces their motivation to serve their constituents while some of them are in office? I think, Doc, you can answer this question as I got out.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much. Yes, it's both ways. When you have the social investment and you get into office, many of them are carried away by power and they fail to serve the people who elected them. And we see evidence of this. And as the electoral areas, even the party structure would complain about being elected on the party platform and getting into parliament and refusing to honor or serve those who elected you. But at the same time, the electorate have become very sophisticated. Even though you've provided social amenities for the community and you are elected, they still expect that you serve them. In the Ghanaian context, they have what they call the Mps Common Fund. Now, this is a fund that is provided by the state for MPs to undertake some form of community development in their constituencies. So they are expected to still maintain and provide those. And if your ambition is to go beyond the parliamentary level and to one day run for the presidency, you must be seen to be responding to the needs of your electoral area, and they try to do that. The evidence are many for those who get into parliament and ignore to serve their electoral areas. So they have to provide that. The other question related to what you asked is what somebody asked some time ago, which is that if there's this pressure on MPs to provide all of this, or there's so much pressure for party activists to provide these before you even qualify to run, that then what do you expect from these politicians when they get into power? All right, that eventually you get what you bargain for, that you will not get community development, and that many of them get into power already bankrupt. They've contracted loans, they've used family properties as collateral to get elected, and that once they get into the public office, they will have to recoup their investment, which is what every rational human being would do. And there's this interesting work done by Stefan Lemberg when he looks at what he calls accountability pressures that MPs in Africa looking at the Ghanaian case faces. And it ties in with the question that you asked. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Doc. There is another question from Joe Donatus. He's asking,
please, I want to ask if the social pathways also open doors for individuals who are not traditionally coming from a political family, otherwise known as allowing new entrants who also actively become part of the party politics and then contributing their quota. So he wants to know whether these social pathways do open doors for individuals who are not traditionally coming from a political family. Thanks.
Yes, they open, but it's a very long route. You would have to invest for close to 4 years or 6, on average 4 years for you to get the opportunity. I'll give you an example of Subin. Subin, the current MP of Subin, Mr. Eugene Ahin, he used to live in London. He was the MPP's UK and Northern Ireland's party chairman. You know, he contested for the party's primaries, I think, on 2 occasions, and he lost. He only won during his 3rd attempt. Okay, yes. So in that context, he was investing, but his investment was not large. He was investing, but he didn't have deep roots in Subin. So he had to invest for this long period to be successful. Elsewhere, you would, especially if you go back into Ghana's political history, you realize that you didn't need to invest in any, especially in the first towards decolonization. Nkrumah is from the western part of Ghana. He stood in Accra and he won. He had the largest vote in the 51 election. Achihashi in Kumasi. So there are several examples. But in the Fourth Republic, you must establish deep roots in the electoral area, in the constituency where you want to run. Do you have family roots there? Is your father from that area? Are you matrilineal? If you're patrilineal, you have to justify why you have to represent. I'll give you another example of the Ghanaian case. There's this gentleman called Ras Mubarak. His first attempt to get into parliament was in somewhere in Accra, I think Mamobi or Nima area. He was not voted for, and the people issue against him was that he was not from that community. So he had to travel all the way to northern Ghana, where his father came from, to run and to be successful to represent his electoral area in parliament. Yes, so Donatus, this is my response to the question. I don't know if I've answered it. Thank you.
Thanks, Doc. Thanks, Doc. Okay.
So the next question asked, please, is there a justification that if the state comes in funding political parties, the negative implication would be reduced? Someone is asking whether if states comes in to fund political parties, the negative implications for these social pathways that you discussed will be reduced or not.
Yes, thank you very much. That's a very important question.
That's one.
Yes. Civil society organizations and even the donor community, they are pushing government towards state sponsorship of election campaigns. In the current context that I just described, it's not sustainable. And the political parties themselves in the Ghanaian context have admitted to that when you are out of power, it's almost impossible for you to be able to mobilize funds, all right? That the party that's in power almost all the time would have funds available. And that because you are not in power and you lack funds, there's no level playing field. So for us to have some form of a level playing field, that the state should come and fund political campaigns. The question many have asked in the Ghanaian context is, which political party will qualify for state sponsorship? Are they all the political parties that have been registered with the Electoral Commission? And if you go to the Electoral Commission's website, currently there are about 23 to 25 political parties registered. in the context of Ghana. So that if the state is going to fund political activities, knowing who the Ghanaian is, that every Ghanaian would form a political party and will try and qualify for state sponsorship. Then others argue that there should be a criteria to use and that it should be based on representation. That if the political party has representation in parliament, that political party would qualify for state sponsorship. But to be honest with you, there's no consensus. The only time political parties talk about the cost of elections is when they're out of power. When they're in power, they don't talk about the cost of elections because the incumbency allows them to manipulate the system and to be able to run a very effective campaign. But when they're out of power, the first 4 years, they struggle. By the 8th year, almost all their funds are drying up, and that is the issue. But to be honest with you, the current system as we have it is a major defect, and I feel that it does not inure to the system, and it will not promote good governance, and it may not consolidate the democracy that Ghana is trying to achieve, because that elections are becoming very expensive for a country that is emerging, spending so much money in elections. I'll give you the only published source that I've come across by Africa Confidential, Patrick Smith. He says that in the 2004 election, the then incumbent MPP, they spent close to $30 million US. That was 2004. Now let's project 2024 to 2020, and you can see how much political parties are spending. It's really very expensive, and it's just not sustainable. I'm for state sponsorship of political campaigns. The challenge only is what criteria are we going to use? How is it going to be regulated? And but we can figure that out. And if there's consensus between all the stakeholders, that should be the way to go. Other than that, private funding, and it's just not sustainable. Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks, Doc. That was Oliver.
So, Doc, Fidelis is asking, so in as much as these social investments have negative connotations on development in the long run, don't you think some of these social investments in a way promote development in some remote communities where on any other day, the grasp of central government might not reach, more of a developmental neo-patrimonialism?
Yes, thank you very much, Fidelis. Yes, that's more of a developmental neo-patrimonialism. And some scholars somewhere said that it's the party encouraging a corruption at the grassroots, but it's no. Fidelis is absolutely right. And in some rural communities, the state is absent. There's no development there. The nearest health post is several kilometers away. And if an aspirant or an ambitious party activist can provide this kind of development, yes, it brings some form of development. And it's using some informal ways of trying to spread development. And that it promotes competition between the political parties. And because Ghana largely is a two-party system, that the NDC and the MPP would want to provide some tangible infrastructure in communities that they feel that, yes, they stand a chance of winning. So you are absolutely right. It's good. There are negatives, which you admit, also admit there are negatives, but that in the long run, it's a form of a redistribution of resources to far-off areas that ideally would not get the state coming in and providing those resources to those communities. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Doc.
Sebastian asks, does
One's ability or
inability to speak the local dialect of the constituency affect their social path to become a parliamentarian?
Yes, Sebastian. Yes. You must identify with the community. You must be seen to be a daughter of the soil or a son of the soil. This is very important. So you should speak one language. If you don't speak any language, you will struggle. And I'll give you an example of Nkrumah's daughter. Samia Nkrumah. Nkrumah is highly regarded across the continent. She came back to run. She won, but she lost eventually. And one of the reasons why she lost her re-election was that The community said they struggled to identify with her. She could not speak the local dialect in Zima. Yes, she's Nkrumah's daughter, but beyond that, you have to identify. When you attend funerals, they want you to sympathize with them. You speak a lot of local language they can identify with. When you are donating to them and you can speak, or when they called you on your phone, they can't speak English. They'll speak the local language too. So it's very important. The local language is very important. It's a very significant marker that you belong. You are a daughter of the soil. You are a son of the soil. So you should be able to speak and speak very well. The example I gave earlier about I think Ras Mubarak. Ras Mubarak, because he is very fluent in Hausa, so he used that to try to enter parliament, running I think Mamobi or Nima area, because largely it's a migrant settlement. Everybody there, the common language is Hausa, so he could speak the language, try and identify, but still, the people saw him as an outsider. But when he returned to Kumbungu in northern Ghana and spoke Hausa and spoke the Bani, yes, the people felt that he was one of them. So it's very important. You have to identify. And language is very powerful. You can use language to campaign, and you can still use the language to communicate effectively with all manner of people that you are seeking to represent. So it's very important. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Doc. Sebastian asked again, do you foresee any changes in the dimensions of the social pathways, especially that politics
in Africa is intimately linked to social classes and belonging?
Thank you. It's a very difficult question. In the long run, there may be some changes. Africa is dynamic and societies are evolving. And I see that there's a claim that there's an emerging middle class. If we believe that claim that there's an emerging middle class, a time will come that you would not need investment. A time will come that when the state is able to play its role effectively by providing all of these social services that individuals are providing to be able to get into parliament, it will be irrelevant for you to use the social pathway. But in the absence of the state providing all of these, the individual who desires to represent an neutral area would have to provide this. But in the long run, I see this declining. I see the social pathway declining as these countries, in the Ghanaian context, as the country deepens its democracy, as the country is able to show the democratic dividends by providing social amenities throughout the country. There wouldn't be any need for individuals to provide. There wouldn't be any need. If at all, what individuals will do is to do what is customary, which is that you are expected to mourn with a brief. You are expected to sympathize. So all MPs, I think, elsewhere will do the same. But the investment, these are capital investments that they are making currently in providing a clinic or hospital or a school somewhere, street lights. These are very high capital investment, and in the long run, they may decline. If these countries are in the Ghanaian context, the state is able to use the resources more productively than currently is doing. It's just that the state is forfeiting its own role. That is why the individuals are doing that, and it should not be the norm. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Doc. Jefferson asks, would there be a time in Ghana's politics where the activities of social pathways would lose ground? Someone would like to know.
Yes, I think that's the same question I responded to, right? Yes,
Exactly.
I feel that it will. Maybe a time that Ghana's democracy is almost the current one. The fourth Republican version is almost nearing 30 years next year. It will be 3 decades. And yes, in this journey, we've seen changes. A lot of changes have come. And I'm seeing that there will be a time that all these social pathways will become irrelevant. You wouldn't need to be deeply rooted in an area. You just have to represent your party. And you'll be voted for based on the message that you are presenting You'll be voted on based on your party's own organizational ability to get you elected. So I see that, but it will take some time. It will take some time. If you ask me how many years, I won't be able to provide the answer, but it will take some time. But what is known is that nothing is static in the Ghanaian context. It's very fluid and it's very dynamic. So there will changes. And as many more people are questioning these systems that we have now, improvements will come, and those improvements will benefit the system. And one is getting individuals off spending so much on their own election campaigns and getting elected to represent political parties. Yes.
Thanks, Doug. Emmanuel asks, please, why are these social
pathways in themselves disadvantaging women from participating in internal party politics?
Emmanuel, thank you. A good question. Yes. The political parties' internal structures try to promote women full participation. But at the same time, those structures are disadvantaging women, like I indicated in the talk. If you look at the major political parties, the National Democratic Congress and the New Patriotic Party, the party's constitutions encourages what they call a nurturing, that you must adopt a electoral area or a constituency and nurture it. And by nurturing, they are encouraging you to invest. They're encouraging you to be visible in the community. Now, culturally, women are not seen as leaders. So no matter how active a woman is, no matter how intelligent, and many of these female activists that I've interviewed are very smart, intelligent women, but they'll tell you that they struggle to raise funds for their own campaign. And sometimes the political party itself will discourage a woman from seeking to be nominated. They tell you that, oh, this is a party stronghold, and that our opponents will take advantage if we have a woman representing us, and they will do that. But of course, this is what I indicated is a defect. It's just not right. It doesn't promote equality in the party ranks, and that there should be a way, either using the affirmative action bill that is still struggling to get passed through Parliament, or the party's own affirmative action policies, which the New Patriotic Party experimented with, but backed off last minute when the men in the party threatened the party leadership. Yes, so it's a major defect. It's a major defect. It's a major defect. Women struggle to compete. They are not seen as credible by sponsors, right? They rather sponsor a male than sponsor a very smart woman who can mobilize, who can promote the interests of the community. Yeah.
Thanks, Doug.
Irene asks,
please, if these social pathways are not cut, does it spell doom for Ghana's development? And will the Ghanaian Parliament continue to be an avenue for recouping investments?
Thank you, Irene. Actually, politics across, I'm afraid I would say across Africa, it's a business. It's a business. It's very lucrative. Everybody wants to get into Parliament. Everybody wants to represent a political party. Yes, so it's just not sustainable. And there should be a way to take this discussion to the next level, which is to look at the cost. Currently, we know how much, these are estimates, how much it costs to run for party nomination. So those costs are not direct, all right? So it affects the state. It affects the state, it retards development. And that, yes, as rational men and women, immediately they get into office, they'll spend some time recouping it. How do they recoup it? If you are lucky and you are tapped by the president and made a cabinet minister, the office that you are going to occupy as a cabinet minister, you would try to cut some corners to make some savings so that you can pay your debt. All right. Yes. So it's a major thing. But like I always say, we in Ghana, we know our problems and we have the solution to the problem, but we go round it. Yes. Well, we shouldn't be having this discussion today because several years ago, like I said, civil society organizations organized they try to advocate and using the donor community to try and get the state to sponsor political parties, so that these social pathways become irrelevant. It will not be there in the first place. No political party will encourage. They just look for what the constitution says for you to be eligible. You must be of sound mind, you must be a Ghanaian, and that is all the minimum requirement for you to represent your party. All right. Even the qualification level, educational qualification level is not that high. So you find sometimes totally illiterate represented. Yeah, that is fine, as long as they are voted for. But the part that is problematic is this social investment. They're not sustainable. They're just not sustainable. Yeah. Thank you, Harry.
Thanks, Doc. Jefferson asked, how much of a threat does the activities
of social pathways pose to meritocracy?
It's a big threat because it's not based on merit. It's based on your pocket and what you can invest. Yes, and so the evidence is there for us to see. You see some people that they have not achieved anything in life, but they're representing people in parliament. There's several examples. I don't want to name names, but you see them. Some have not even finished university, but they're elected and they go to represent people in parliament. So once you haven't achieved anything in your own personal life, you're just representing. It's not based on merit, it's based on how deep your pockets are, how influential your pockets are. That is all it is. And it goes a long way to explain some of the bills that are passed in parliament. And sometimes you wonder, okay, yes, these guys are knowledgeable. They should be able to see in black and white that this bill that is being passed, it will not benefit the state, but they'll go ahead and pass it. All right, because getting into office was not based on meritocracy. It was based on how deep their pockets, who sponsored them, and all of that. There's several examples across Ghana. You see that these are party activists who have not achieved anything in life. They're just starting life, but they're representing. So it's part of the problem we are facing in the country. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Richard asked Doc, please ask Doc his take on women replacing their deceased husbands in parliament. Do they leverage on the pathways created by their husbands?
Thank you very much. Yes, yes, yes. And that is why now, so let me explain for our audience. In Ghana, a phenomenon has emerged that yes, these are husbands of deceased MPs, either in an election year or in between election years, the husband passes, then the party quickly would nominate, would select. This is no nomination. The deceased wife is selected to run for the electoral area. With several, we have about 3 or 4 examples now. Awia was Wagon, then the Infansipin one, then Agomeda also. Yes, these were aspirants who died in the course of the election, and the party replaced them with their wives. So the answer is yes. The party feels that the husband invested so much, and that now that he's no more, for the family to benefit, that is natural, that is fair to discourage others from running against the dead man's wife and just allowing her to represent the husband. And that, yes, so that is the social argument for that. Many of these, the cases that I gave, the parties did not organize any competitive primary election in those areas. It was just decided that based on the role that the husband played, and that to honor the dead, it would be befitting to allow the wife to step in and replace the husband. And in many of these cases, that is what the argument was, but it was based on the investment. It was based on the investment. The example I gave you of the Ayos West wagon, yes, you see the late Abuache Ajako, how much he invested in that constituency, taking it for so many years. That is the most elite part of Ghana. He's covered part of Legon and East Legon area there. Yes, but he held onto that seat for so many years, and he served the people so well. So the party felt that it was proper for the wife. In his case, the only unfortunate thing was that we later on learned that he had 3 or 2 wives. So the wives had to now decide which of them will represent the husband. But eventually one of them represented, and she's the current member of parliament for that area. Is the investment that the husbands made in the party's name, and the parties feel obliged to allow their wives to step in and represent them. Yes, so that was a good, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Joshua asked, regarding the restraints within the pathways in our democratic structure, should we not consider other alternatives of democracy, as suggested by some scholars, a one-party system modeled on a system that will accommodate the excesses of ethnic divisions and social interests?
Thank you, Joshua. It's a very interesting question. No, I didn't go deep, but Ghana has experimented with several models. We've experimented with one-party state and Nkrumah. On top of that, Nkrumah introduced his African socialism, and he moved to Nkrumahism. We overthrew the First Republic, experimented with parliamentary democracy, Second Republic. We overthrew that. We came to the military regimes, and for 11 years under Rawlings wanted to search for an indigenous form of governance structure that will work for the African, taking into consideration all these multiple ethnicities that we have in Ghana. And after 11 years of searching for that model, Rawlings eventually embraced the Western model of multi-party politics. That model is very problematic. It's ill-suited for the African context. But we are pretending that it's working for us, and we are running with it. But the question, which I don't have the answer, is which one would work for the Africa? Some have argued that we could combine some good aspects of the Western liberal democracy form with our traditional pre-colonial centralized states that existed. Now, for example, in the context of Ghana, we could take what was good about the Asante centralized state and merge this with what liberal democracy is offering us. Now, if you look at the Asante state, for example, there's some form of accountability. The Asante Hene, even though he was described as absolute and that he wields so much power, could be deposed if he failed. And there's so many examples in Asante's history of Asante Henes who did not perform up to expectation and they were removed from office. In the current context that we have as multi-party democracy, you can only remove a president during election 4 years. And it appears the African political leadership, they've mastered the game very well. Sometimes they'll manipulate the system, so it will be very difficult to throw them out, all right, until the system is just so bad, okay? So I'm for a measure of what is African and what has worked in the past for these countries, and merging it with what is good about liberal democracy. Okay, yes, liberal democracy, the emphasis is on these abstract things about freedoms, liberties, they are good. The pre-colonial systems that I'm talking about, some of them, there was some liberty, there was some freedom, we could exercise those, all right? So going forward, we may have to, but in the current context, it is just competition for power for the sake of power, and not competition for power to use power to develop these countries. And across, I'll give a related example of what the current pandemic that we're facing. COVID came and exposed all the weaknesses that we have in the system. We're pretending that where the systems were working, but COVID came and just exposed these countries that none of them, except maybe in North Africa, Egypt, if you go to southern part of Africa, South Africa, the rest of Sub-Saharan Africa, all these countries are virtually begging the West to come and give us vaccines, all right? It's a system and it's their liberal democracy, in quotes, they are not working. It's a system that we should. But honestly, I always also say that what we practice in Africa is not liberal democracy, it's a hybrid, okay? So it should work for our context, and it should solve the problems that these countries are grappling with. Unemployment is a major issue. The lack of industrialization is a major issue. Okay, how are we going to address this? Africans are migrating in their numbers. Everybody's in a hurry to just pack and leave, all right? Because they don't see these countries as worthy of living and trying to, it's better dying on the Sahara Desert than staying at home and dying there. All these are issues that, but to answer your question, it's a very difficult one, but a hybrid system would be my suggestion, that we should go back, revisit our history, and take what was best for that period and try and merge that with the Western form that we will embrace. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Doc. Thanks very much. I
also have a question, and it is very tied to the last answer that you gave, because I'm writing my thesis and it's on finding alternative democratic models for Africa, Ghana to be specific. I am proposing deliberative democracy, a form of direct democracy, as a better alternative, in the Ghanaian context. Do you? I would like to know what your thoughts are on such a model, whether it is prudent that we merge it with representative democracy, or
probably we replace that with replace representative democracy with deliberative democracy. So that's the first part of the question. And the second part
has to do with the fact that
looking at how
these pathways have created a particular avenue for just anybody in the society who cannot make it in the private sector to use it to get into parliament and then recoup their investments. Is it not prudent that we just banish
representative democracy in its totality and then find a better model like, the deliberative democracy or other forms of participatory democracy? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Enoch. That's a very, I'm happy you are currently researching, and when you finish, I'd like to read your work. Maybe the answer will be there. I don't have the answer. But doing away with representative democracy is going to be very difficult. I think we are in the middle of the road. It's not possible to go back. We may just have to forge ahead and try and look at the system and have some discussions around it. Currently, the system, the way it operates, it benefits the political elite. Of course, if you're in power, it benefits you. So they want things the way they are. It's only when they're outside power that they try to. I'll give an example that the NDC, having come from a military to civilian and now losing power for the first time, it thought that there were some defects with the 1992 Constitution. And under the leadership of the former president, President Mills, when he eventually, having tried several times and winning the election, engineered what he called the Constitutional Review Commission to look at the Constitution and try and suggest some solutions to improving it. They produced a very important report. The report has never been implemented. Okay, and the NDC are now out of power. They were in power when they commissioned that report. They should have implemented a lot of the recommendations, but because they were in power, they didn't see the need. And I don't know what kind of thinking sometimes goes into this. But they're out of power, and they see that when you're out of power, you're disadvantaged. Okay. But to answer your question, which I don't have an answer, that there need to be a discussion. There need to be a discussion as to what form of, if we are where we are currently, that's, I think we're in the middle of the road, that representative democracy is the way, but that let's try and look at it and make it work for our context. I think that would be the only way. It's the external bit that we don't talk much about. The Western world is interested in having representative democracy across Africa. There's a lot of investment when it comes to elections. They're promoting and they're spending so much trying to have that. Okay, that is the only model in their context that is credible. So this model must work for everyone. But there are challenges with that model, and that the model is not producing results for these non-Western countries where it's being experimented with, okay? And that these countries on their own should initiate some discussions around this question of what kind of model do we want, okay? And try and see if there's going to be some national consensus on that. And I'm beginning to sense that in the context of Ghana, the political elite thinks that, yes, there need to be some discussions around this form of representative democracy that we have, and that let's try and see if we can try and add onto it, subtract parts that are just not working in the Ghanaian context and move along with that. Yes, I think there will be a way somehow. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Bob. And my last question has to do, you talked about how someone asked about meritocracy, and then you discussed how people do not get into parliament by merit, and that the so-called knowledge base of these parliamentarians are sometimes questionable. I want to know what your thoughts are on giving power to people themselves, through deliberative democracy to make policies, that directly affects them. Do you believe that the general public, the ordinary person, does have that kind of capacity to make decisions for themselves at that particular level, or we still need some form of representative, democracy whereby we get more qualified people to be in parliament? Yes, I want to know your thoughts on that.
Yes, the people have a way of knowing who can represent them and have access to their problems. That will be different from how I, as an observer, would judge those areas. There are several examples. Is that Equatia? I must say, she's a self-made woman. She had I'm sure she still has that hairdressing salon, but she's not very high up on the educational ladder. She had to get a translator in parliament and to attend some form of classes to understand issues in parliament. But she was voted for by her people, all right. I don't necessarily think that you need to have some high level of education. In the context of meritocracy, I would rather link it to some form of achievement at the individual level, that you've achieved something, you've done something very significant on your own. For example, you are a trained teacher and you've taught for close to 15 years, training other people to be able to think. This is an achievement for me. You are a businessman, you've run businesses, you've employed people on your own. Yes, this is some achievement, and that you should be able to represent. And that the people should be the best judges. They live in the community with you. Yes, they should be able to, okay? But I think where we miss and where there is this challenge, and perhaps where we don't see the representativeness of the process, and that there's a disconnect between representing an area and playing the function of a representative. Of course, they're supposed to play an oversight role in parliament. They're supposed to hold the executive accountable, and they feel that that's the way to go, okay? But you should allow, I think the people will know. I would go back to an earlier submission that I made, that I think it's also to do with the level of poverty that we see across these countries. And that if there's an improvement in lifestyles of Africans in these countries, where you would not need a political office to access power, to access wealth, but that you have a very vibrant so-called private sector, and that, yes, things may work. But to answer your questions, I think the people in those communities, we may question their judgment. I think they know something that me and you, where we sit with our level of education, may think that this is problematic, but they do that. They can elect a very popular comedian. You've seen a couple of comedians who are trying to run for office of parliament. The question you ask is that, oh, these are comedians. What do they have to go? Can they understand these things that are going to be discussed? But in the eyes of the community, these are people that they feel they can identify with, that they will represent them very well. But it's problematic. There's another proposal that the party could have a short list, having vetted party activists. You make a short list, and then the short list could be voted on. All right. But here again, knowing the system that will operate, you will find people who will make it into this short list. They will still be the same people that we and you have problems with. Okay, that somebody will see that process as lucrative. Okay, if I'm the one in charge, I'm going to make the short list. All right, I will sell the slots that are available for you to gain entry into that. Yes, it's something that, yeah, Enoch, I think that's, I'm waiting. When you have the work, I'll read it.
Sure. Thanks so much, Doc, for honoring our invitation to speak to us today. This brings us to the end of our lecture series today. I hope that everybody was very much satisfied
with how the questions were answered and also the cracks of the work that Doc presented on.
Later on, we will try our very best to get you in contact with Doc if you would like to learn more about the research that he's working on or any other
things. But for now, we would like to say
thank you so much
for honoring this particular invitation. Every single attendee, we are very grateful for
your time and how much time you have actually spent here today. And also to Doc, we are very grateful for you honoring our invitation today. We actually hope that you would actually come on campus one time to have talks
about so many other things. But until then, we are very much grateful for your time here. And I'm also very grateful for to Kajitan and Nora and Steph, who's our council chair. She's on the call for
organizing this lecture series.
It has been very educative, and I'm very
thankful. So thanks so much.
And this brings us to the end of our series. Thanks.
Right. Thank you so much too for the invitation. I enjoy myself, and I'm feeling sleepy because I should be sleeping in Ghana now, right?
Yes.
All right. So I'll catch up with you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.